Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum students. Welcome to our 23rd lecture of MTH 108 Business Math 1. Today we will continue with our chapter 9, which is about matrix algebra. Okay. In our last lectures about this chapter, what we have studied so far, we have studied the matrices, their definition, why do we need them, and some basic facts about the matrices. Okay. Then we have also seen some special types of matrices, the transpose of a matrix, and how we can calculate the transpose. Then we have also studied the matrix operations, which include addition, scalar multiplication, and multiplication, and some properties of matrix operations. Okay, then we have studied the matrix equations and how we can use the matrix equations to represent our system of equations. A system of equations can be a linear equation or a non-linear one. Then we have studied what do we mean by the determinant, how we can find the determinant of matrices of any order, where the determinant can only be is defined only for square matrices. Okay, then some properties of determinants, and then we have studied the Cramer's rule. The Cramer's rule basically helps us in solving the system of linear equations. Here, Cramer's rule is only valid for linear equations and not for non-linear equations. Okay, in our last lecture, we have studied about the inverse of a matrix. What do we mean by the inverse of a matrix? How we can find it? One method we have studied in our last lecture was the Gaussian transformation. That is, we have reduced our given matrix into the identity matrix form and find the inverse. And how we can use this inverse to solve the system of linear equations. Now we have studied three methods of solving the system of linear equations. Two methods in our chapter 3, by the elimination method and by Gaussian elimination, and two methods for solving the system of linear equations in this chapter. That is, when we transform our system in a matrix form, then either we can use the Cramer's rule if we are good enough in calculating the determinants, because the Cramer's rule basically uses the determinants, and we can also find the solution of our system of linear equations by using the inverse of matrix. If we are good enough in calculating the inverse, then we can use this method. Today we will study one more method of finding the inverse of a matrix, which is known as the method of cofactors. And we will also see some applications of matrices. That is, how we can transform our real world problem into the matrix representation, and then we calculate what is required or what output we want. Okay, now we start our today's lecture by first calculating the inverse by using the cofactor method. The term cofactor we have already seen in our previous lectures when we were trying to find the determinant of our matrices, that is particularly the square matrices of order greater than 2. There we had to find the cofactors of the respective entry, and then we find the determinant. So this cofactor is exactly the same which we have seen in our previous lectures for solving the determinants. Okay, now how can we use this method of cofactors to find the inverse of a matrix? We are given a square matrix A whose inverse is to be determined. Then by using the method of cofactors, we have only 3 steps to do. First, we have to find the matrix of cofactors. What do we mean by the matrix of cofactors? That is, for example, we are provided a square matrix of order 2 by 2. Then for each entry we have to find the respective cofactor. Okay, first, and then we will write them in the matrix form. Okay, once we have found the matrix of cofactors, then we can find the adjoint matrix. And how we define the adjoint of a matrix? The adjoint of a matrix is nothing but the transpose of the matrix of cofactors. That is transpose of the matrix which we have obtained in our step 1. Then the final step will be to take the ratio of both the quantities, that is the quotient of the transpose of the matrix of cofactors to the ratio of our determinant of the given matrix A, in which we are interested in finding the inverse. So we start with an example, but before starting, we may give some notations to our matrices which we will use. That is, if A is the matrix and we are interested in finding the A inverse of this matrix, then by using the method of cofactors, our first step is to find the matrix of cofactors. We denote this matrix by A subscript C. Then we take the adjoint of our matrix A. Adjoint of our matrix can be written as adjoint, the abbreviation of adjoint of the matrix A, or by A subscript J. Okay, and our third step is nothing but the adjoint of our matrix A divided by the determinant of our matrix A. Okay. Suppose we start with a simple case. Suppose we have a matrix A, a 2 by 2 matrix with entries 4, 3, -2, -1, and we are interested in finding the inverse of this matrix. Then now here we have a 2 by 2 matrix. Then here we will not use this method, that is the adjoint of A divided by determinant of A. But for this 2 by 2 matrix, to find the adjoint is very easy. How? Our adjoint matrix will be obtained by interchanging the main diagonal entries. Remember, these entries A11 and A22 are our main diagonal entries. So we will interchange our main diagonal entries, that is A11 will be the entry A22 now, and A22 entry will be A11 now. And for the other diagonal, for this diagonal, what we will do, we will simply multiply these entries with -1. So the entry A12 will be equals to -3, and the entry A21 will be equals to 2. So this is the adjoint of a square matrix of order 2 by 2. And next step is to find the determinant, that is determinant of A, or we may write it here. Determinant of A is the product of the main diagonal, that is 4 into -1, minus the product of the other diagonal, which is -2 into 3. We obtained -4 plus 6, which is 2. Okay. And the last step is to take the ratio of adjoint of A to the determinant of A. So adjoint matrix, we write here -1, -3, 2, 4, divided by the determinant is a real valued number 2, and we obtained. Now dividing by 2 is nothing but multiplying our matrix by a number 1 by 2, which means that each entry will be multiplied by this scalar 1 by 2, and we obtained -1 by 2, -3 by 2, 1 and 2. So this is the inverse of our given matrix of order 2 by 2. Now if we want to recall what we have done in finding the adjoint of our matrix A, then the adjoint of a square matrix of order 2 by 2 is obtained by interchanging the elements of the main diagonal, interchanging the elements of the main diagonal. Okay, and multiplying by -1 the entries of the other diagonal, that is the entries of other diagonal are multiplied by the scalar minus 1. So this is how we find the adjoint of a matrix of order 2 by 2. Just for the sake of practice, consider our matrix D, a 2 by 2 matrix with entries -3, -4, 10 and 8. Then the adjoint of this matrix D will be obtained by interchanging the entries of the main diagonal, that is A22 entry will be now A11 entry, A11 entry will be A22, and by multiplying the entries of the other diagonal by -1. So here we obtained 4 and here we obtained -10. Okay, we can also find the determinant of this matrix. Determinant of this matrix is the product of the main diagonal -3 into 8 minus the product of the other diagonal 10 into -4, which is -24 plus 40, which is equals to 16. And the inverse of this matrix will be the ratio of the adjoint to the determinant, that is when the adjoint is multiplied by the reciprocal of the determinant, that is multiplying this adjoint by 1 by 16 we obtained 1 by 2, 1 by 4, -5 by 8 and -3 by 16 is the inverse of this square matrix of order 2 by 2. Now we use this method of cofactors to find the inverse of a matrix of order 3 by 3. Suppose we are a given matrix B of order 3 by 3 with entries 1, 2, 0, 1, 0, -1, -1, 3, 2. Suppose we are given this matrix and we are asked to find the inverse of this matrix by using the method of cofactors. Then we have to find first the method of matrix of cofactors. Then we have to find the adjoint of the matrix of cofactors. Then we have to find the adjoint of the original matrix, which is the transpose of the matrix of cofactors. We have to find the determinant of our matrix, and in the end the ratio of adjoint of A to the adjoint of B to the determinant of B. Okay, now we start by finding the matrix of cofactors. That is, for each entry we have to find our cofactor and write it in the matrix form. For entry A11 or for entry B11, which is equals to 1, the matrix of cofactors will be obtained by deleting the row containing the entry and deleting the column, which means that we have to neglect first row and first column. We are left with a submatrix of order 2 by 2, and then we have to find the determinant of this matrix multiplied by the number associated with the entry. The number associated with this entry is 1, okay, and the determinant of the submatrix is 0 into 2 minus 3 into -1, which is equals to 3. Okay, for the entry B12, which is equals to 2, the number associated will be -1, and the minor, that is the determinant of the submatrix, will be equals to 1 into 2 minus -1 into -1, and we obtained as -1 into 2 minus 1 as -1. Okay. Now the entry B13, which is 0, the number associated with this entry is 1, okay, and the determinant of the submatrix, that is the minor, will be 1 into 3 minus 1 into 0, and we obtained 3. Similarly, we have to find the cofactors for the rest of the entries. For the entry B21, which is 1, the number associated will be -1. Okay, and now the minor of this entry, the minor will be 2 into 2 minus 3 into 0, which is -1, into 4, which is -4. The cofactor of the entry B22, the entry itself is 0, and the number associated with the entry is 1. Okay, we may omit this 1 because we are sure that the number associated will be either equals to 1 or -1. And now the minor of this entry, we obtained 2 into 1 minus -1 into 0, which is equals to 2. If we recall the method of finding the determinant by using the cofactors, there we had to multiply the entry with the cofactor. So if the entry is 0, we have never calculated the cofactor for that particular entry. But here, if the entry is 0, even then we have to calculate the cofactor for that entry. Why? Because here we are not multiplying that particular entry, for example entry B13 or entry B22, with its cofactor. What we will do, we will find these cofactors for each of the entries, and we will write these cofactors in the matrix form with their respective entries. For example, the cofactor of the entry B11, which is equals to 3, will be written in the matrix form at position 1 1, that is first row and first column, and so on for the rest of the entries. Okay, now the cofactor for the entry B23, the entry itself is -1, and the number associated with it will be -1, and we obtained 3 into 1 minus -1 into 2, which is equals to -1 into 3 plus 2 is -5. Okay, similarly we have to find the cofactors for the rest of the 3 entries. Now the cofactor for the entry B31, which is equals to -1, will be, the number associated will be 1, and the minor will be equals to -2. Okay, the cofactor with respect to the entry B32, which is equals to 3, will be -1 into 1, which is equals to 1. The cofactor for the entry B33, which is 2 itself, will be, the number associated will be 1 into -2 is -2. And now we have to write our matrix of cofactors with their respective entries. So the matrix of cofactors will be 3, -1, writing it in the row form, -3, -1, 3, -4, 2, -5, -2, 1, -2. This is our matrix of cofactors for the given matrix B. Now next step is to find the adjoint of B, which is the transpose of the matrix of cofactors. By transpose we mean that the rows will be the columns and the columns will be the rows. So we are interchanging the rows with the columns. So first row will be our first column now, that is 3, -1, 3. The second row will be our second column, that is -4, 2, -5, and the third row will be our third column, which is minus with entries -2, 1 and minus 2. Next we have to find the determinant of our matrix. The determinant of the matrix can be found by selecting any row or any column. We have selected our first row. You may find the determinant by selecting the second row or the third row or any of the 3 columns, and the answer will be the same. Okay, by selecting the first row, the determinant will be equals to the first entry is 1 and the cofactor is 3 minus, because the entry 1 2 has the number associated with it as minus 1, 2 into 2 minus 1, and the third entry is 0. Solving this, we obtained as 3 minus 2 into 1, which is equals to 1. So the determinant of our given matrix is 1. And now the inverse. Inverse is multiplying our adjoint by the reciprocal of the determinant. That is, our adjoint was 3 minus 4 minus 2 minus 1 2 1 3 minus 5 and minus 2, and multiplying this adjoint with the reciprocal of the determinant, that is 1 over 1, and we obtain our same matrix, that is the matrix of adjoint. This may not be the case in every matrix. As we have seen in the example of our matrix of order 2 by 2, there the determinant was different from 1, and we have multiplied our adjoint by the reciprocal of the determinant, and the resultant was the inverse of our given matrix. So this matrix is basically the inverse of our given matrix of order 3 by 3 by using the method of cofactors. Now this method of finding the inverse may be a bit lengthy, but if we are asked to find the inverse of a matrix by using this method of cofactors, then before proceeding, the first step is to find the determinant. If the determinant delta is equals to 0, then the inverse of that matrix does not exist. Then the inverse of the matrix does not exist. But if the determinant is different from 0, then we can proceed further by first finding the cofactors, writing them in the matrix form, taking the transpose of that matrix to find the adjoint of our matrix, and then dividing by the or multiplying by the reciprocal of the determinant. But if the determinant is 0, then there is no need to proceed further, because such matrices do not have any inverse. Now in our last lecture, when we have seen the inverses and the Gaussian transformation method to find the inverses of our matrices, we have also studied the system of linear equations and the solutions by using the inverses of matrices. If we compare this method, that is solving the system of linear equations by using the inverses, or the Cramer's rule method, which is solving the system of linear equations by using the determinants, then these two methods are not so accurate or do not give us the exact information about the type of the solution of the system of equations. How? If we compare, we have our system of equations, of linear equations, and in this chapter we have solved the system of linear equations by using the inverses, okay, by using the determinants, that is our Cramer's rule, And in our chapter 3, where we have studied system of linear equations by using the Gaussian elimination procedure, or simple elimination procedure. Okay. Now, if we are asked to find the system of our linear equations, then which method we will prefer? We will prefer our methods of chapter 3. Why? Because here we have seen that when we have used the Cramer's rule and we say that if the determinant delta is equals to 0, then we have two conclusions. That is, either the system has no solution at all or the system has infinitely many solutions. And same are the conclusions as with the use of inverses. That is, by using the inverses to solve the system of linear equations, we conclude that either the system has no solution or infinitely many solutions, and the second option is if the solution is unique. But by using this Gaussian elimination method, we can clearly see what type of solution we have. That is, either the system has a unique solution, or a system has no solution, or a system has an infinitely many solutions. So Gaussian elimination method is preferred when we are asked to find this solution of the unknowns appearing in our system of linear equations. With this, we have studied enough about the matrices, and now we will see how we can apply our matrix information or the matrix algebra in our real world problems. Now, matrix algebra is used in many applications, but there is no fixed rule or no set of formulas or approaches to solving all the matrix applications, which means that in every real world problem transformed into the matrix equation form, we have to start a different technique, or they are solved in a different manner. But if we remember few steps, then they can simplify our task of solving the matrix equations. How? If we determine the desired output information required to generate using the matrix computations, that is, if we are clear what we are asked to find, then the matrix computations will be easy to handle. By examining the matrix data and assess whether they contain the component information necessary to generate the desired output, that is, we are given with some matrix data, and first we have to look at it that what type of output is required and the matrix data is sufficient to provide the required output. Also, we can do some computations of the output information desired in a non-matrix manner. For our second point, what do we mean by examining the matrix data is that we have to look at our given data and we have to see that is it enough, is it in the good condition to proceed further to find the values of the required outputs, which means that sometimes we have to multiply two matrices to find our required output. Sometimes we have to add the matrices, that is, we have to do some some operations on the matrices, or we may also take the transpose of the matrix to go further to find the required output. The fourth point which may help us in solving the applications is to test different matrix combinations for computational and output compatibility, where these matrix combinations may be the transpose. By taking the transpose, by applying the matrix operations, by looking at the dimensions, that are the dimensions compatible for the addition, compatible for the subtraction, or compatible for the matrix multiplication. So now we look at some examples to have an idea where these matrices are used, or where we can store this data in our matrix form and simplify our work and calculate the desired output. First, for example, we are given a survey which indicates the voters' preference in the form of a matrix P in 6 districts. That is, our matrix P is given as, we have some districts and we have some type of candidates. We have 6 districts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, and we have the entries as 0.4, 0.42, 0.18, 0.35, 0.4, 0.25. The column 3 has entries 0.3, 0.25, 0.45. The column 4 has entries 0.5, 0.3, 0.2. Next column has entries 0.3, 0.3 and 0.4. And the last column has entries 0.36, 0.32 and 0.32. Okay. And the first row represents the Democrat, Republican and the Independent. Okay. We are given some data in the matrix form where the columns basically represents the districts. We have 6 districts and we have 3 types of candidates: Democrat, Republican or Independent candidate. And this matrix basically represents the number of possible voters expected to vote for the Democratic candidate in District 1. For example, first our columns indicates the percentage of the voters in each district who are expected to vote for the different candidates. For example, column 1 represents the percentage of the voters, that is for in District 1. What does this entry tells us? That in District 1, 40% of the voters are expected to vote for the Democratic candidate. In District 2, 35% voters are expected to vote for the Democratic candidate. For example, if we look at our column 6 and third row, this entry tells us that 32% voters are expected to vote from the District 6 to the Independent candidate. So the entries in the rows are basically telling us about the percentage for the respective candidates, and the entries in the columns are telling us about the percentage for the expected voters from the different districts. And we have formulated this data into the matrix form. Okay, that is, we have number of districts, number of candidates, types of candidates, and the expected voters or the percentage of the expected voters. And we are asked to find the estimate turnout for each of the candidate. How we will find it? For example, given these voters' preferences, it is possible to project the election outcomes if the number of citizens expecting to vote in each district is known. That is, if we know that how many citizens are expected to vote from District 1, from District 2 and so on from District 6. Then with respect to the number of citizens, we can calculate the percentage of voters expected for the candidate 1, for the candidate 2 and for the candidate 3. If matrix V contains the current estimates of these numbers, where the matrix V is given as 30,000 with entries 30,000, 60,000, 70,000, 45,000, 55 and 40,000. Now this matrix V gives us the information about the number of expected citizens from each district which are expected to vote. That is, this tells us about the number of expected citizens or the number of citizens expected to vote from District 1. The citizens expected to vote from District 2, and so on. So we have a column matrix. Okay. Now we have the data of the expected citizens to vote and the data of the percentage of the voters for each candidate from each district. Now we are interested in finding the election outcome. We can find the election outcome by multiplying our matrix P with V. That is, our matrix P was 0.4, 0.42, 0.18, 0.35, 0.4, 0.25, 0.3, 0.25, 0.45, 0.5, 0.3, 0.2, 0.3, 0.3, 0.4, 40%, 36%, 32%, and 32%. And our matrix V was the number of expected citizens from each district. Okay. And 40,000. So this is our matrix P, this is our matrix V. Okay. And we will take the product of these two matrices. Now our matrix P is a matrix of order 3 by 6, that is, we have 3 rows and 6 columns. Our matrix V is a column matrix of 6 rows and 1 column. So the expected outcome or the election outcome will be a matrix a product of PV, and the matrix of order number of rows of the first and the number of columns of the second. That is a column matrix of order 3 by 1. And multiplying these two matrices, we obtain these quantities, which means that the candidate 1 will be most successful if this data is accurate. So by simply transforming the data into the matrix form, we can easily calculate our required outcome. Let us look at one more example, which is about the production planning. If a company manufactures 5 products and the company has divided its sale into 3 sales districts, that is, the company manufactures five products and the company wishes to sell these 5 products only in 3 districts. Okay, and this matrix, and we have a matrix representing the data which summarizes what the expected sale for each product in each district in the coming month. That is, we have, let's say, if S is our matrix, then we have 5 products and 3 districts or 3 regions. Okay, we have 3 regions, 1, 2, 3, and we have 5 products. That is product 1, product 2, 3, 4 and 5. These are our products. Okay. And the data which the company has is that the product 1 is expected to sell in region 1 of 500 units, in region 2 200 units, in region 3 350 units. The expected sale of the product 2 in region 1 is 400 units, in region 2 is 300 units, and in region 3 as only 100 units. Similarly, the expected sale of the product 3 in region 1 is given by 250 units, in region 2 by 425 units, and in region 3 by 50 units. The expected sale of the product 4 in region 1 is given as 100 units, in region 2 as 150 units, and in region 3 as 350 units. And lastly, the expected sale of the product 5 in region 1 is given as 200 units, in region 2 as 175 units, and in region 3 as 225 units. So this matrix tells us about the information of the expected sale of each product in each region. And this is a matrix of order 5 by 3. That is, we have 5 rows and 3 columns. Okay. Further information we have that each product, remember the company manufactures 5 products. Now each of these 5 products is manufactured by using combinations of 4 standard components. That is, we need a combination of 4 standard components to prepare our product 1, a combination of 4 components to prepare our product 2, and so on. For this type of data, we have a matrix R, which basically tells us the number of units of each component required to produce the respective product. That is, we have 5 products and 4 components are required to prepare each product. So our matrix R will be a matrix of order 5 by 4, where the matrix R is given as, that is, our columns represents the components and our rows represents the products. Okay, for component 1, 2, 3 and 4. Okay. Now product 1 needs 1 units of component 1, no unit of component 2, 2 units of component 3 and no unit of component 4 to be produced. Okay. Now the first row tells us about the number of components required to manufacture that particular product. Okay. Similarly, we have the information about the rest of the products. As for the product 2, the product 2 requires 1 units of component 1, 2, 3 and no units of component 4 for its manufacturing. For the product 3 requires 2 units of component 1, 1 unit of component 2, no units of component 3 and 3 units of component 4 for its manufacturing. Product 4 requires no units of component 1, 2 units of component 2 and 1 units of component 3 and 4 for its manufacturing. Now to prepare the product 5, we need 1 unit of component 1, 2 units of component 2, 3 units of component 1 and 1 unit of component 4. So again, now we have some data in the matrix form. This matrix R tells us about the number of components required to manufacture each product. Okay, and this matrix R has order 5 by 4. That is, we have 5 products and they are made by a combination of 4 components. Okay, we have further information about the components. That is, the manufacture of each component requires the consumption of certain resources. That is, to manufacture or to produce one component, we require some resources or some consumption of resources. If our matrix P represents the quantities of the 3 standard parts required to produce that component and the number of labor hours to produce 1 unit of that component, then we have some data in the form of our matrix P. Now we have 4 components and each component requires 3 resources, that is 3 standard parts and 2 labor resources, which means that our matrix will be of order 4 by 5. That is, here we have our resources, resources 1, 2, 3, then production labor, assembly labor. Okay, and here we have our components. Now first we write them and then we will put the parenthesis. 1, 2, 1, 0, 0. Okay. Okay. And we have the entries 0, 1, 2, 3. That is, component 1 requires 2 units of part 1, no unit of part 2, 1 unit of part 3, 2 production labor hours and 3 assembly labor hours. Now component 2 requires 1 unit of part 1, 3 units of part 2, 2 units of part 3, 5 production labor hours and 1 assembly labor hours. Okay. Component 4 requires no unit of part 1, 2 units of part 2, 1 unit of part 3, 4 hours from the production labor and 2 hours from the assembly labor. Now component 4 requires no unit of part 1, 4 units of part 2, 1 unit of part 3, 1 hour for the production labor and 6 hours for the assembly labor. Okay. Now we have 3 matrices, matrix S, matrix R and matrix P. We are also given the further information that we have a matrix C which determines the cost of each of the 5 resources. That is, the resources were cost required for the part 1, cost required for the part 2, cost required for each unit of part 3, cost required for the production labor hours, cost required for the assembly labor hours. And we have a matrix, that is the matrix C, which is the cost matrix, and this cost matrix has values 25, 15, 30, 10 and 8. That is, $25 are required to produce 1 unit of part 1, $15 are required to produce 1 unit of part 2, $30 are required to produce 1 unit of part 3, $10 are required for 1 hour of the production labor, $8 are required for 1 hour of the assembly labor. Okay. Now the management of the company wants to manipulate this data in the matrices to calculate. We have already manipulated the data in the matrix form, and they are interested in knowing 4 things. That is, the total expected demand for each final product, the quantities needed of each of the 4 components, the resource requirements to produce the 4 components, and the total cost of producing the quantities of 5 products needed for the next month. So how we will proceed? What we are given with? We were given with 3 regions. Okay, so we have our regions: sales region, we were given 3 regions in which the company is interested in selling its products. Then we have product demand. The company is interested in selling 5 products: 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. And in between we have our regional demand. Oops. Okay. Then we have our component requirements. Okay. And each product needs 4 components, that is 1, 2, 3 and 4. And each component needs 5 resources. Then we have our resource requirements. This is component, this is the component demand. And each component requires 5 resources, so we have our resource demand. And our resources are 5, that is 1, 2, 3 standard parts and some hours from the production labor and some hours from the assembly labor. And then we are provided with the cost for each of the resources. Okay. And by connecting all these values, we will obtain a sort of diagram, but that diagram will be too complicated. All we have to do is we will connect these values where the company is expecting the sale of product 1 in region 1 was 500 units and so on. Now we start by solving the first thing which the company is interested to know, that is the total expected demand for each final product. Now the expected demand for each final product can be easily obtained simply by adding the entries in each row. If we go back to our first matrix S, that is the first thing company is interested in knowing is the total expected demand for the each product, which means that if we simply add the entries of first row, we will come to know the expected demand of the product 1 in all the regions. Adding the second row, we will obtain the expected demand of the product 2 in all the 3 regions and so on. So the total expected demand for each product can be easily obtained by adding the entries of that respective row. But we are asked to use the matrices or to write the data in the matrix form. What we will do in this case? Now our matrix S has order 5 by 3, and what type of output we are required? The total expected demand for each final product. We have 3 types of products. We have 5 types of products, okay, in 3 regions. Okay. So the total expected demand for each product, and to write it in the matrix form, the matrix will be of the form, if demand D represents the matrix showing the expected demand for each final product, then we have 5 products and we are asked to find the total output, that is the sum or the number of units for that product. So our output matrix D will be a matrix of order 5 by 1. That is a column matrix of 5 rows and 1 column, where each row represents the total expected demand for each product. So how we can obtain this matrix D from our given matrix S of order 5 by 3? That is, our matrix D will be obtained by matrix S and multiplying it by a matrix of order 3 by 1. That is a column matrix of 3 rows and 1 column. And what will be the entries of this matrix? They will be simply 1. So our matrix D will be the product of our matrix S, which was the total sales of the expected sales of each product in our 3 regions, 400, 300, 100, writing our matrix S again, 250, 425 and 50, 100, 150, 350, 200, 175, 225, and multiplying it by our column matrix of order 3 by 1. So this is a matrix of order 5 by 3, a matrix of order 3 by 1, and the resultant will be a matrix of order 5 by 1. In multiplying these two matrices, we obtained the total expected demand for each product. These two matrices are very easy to multiply, that is 500 plus 200 plus 350, 400 plus 300 plus 100, 250 plus 425 plus 50, and adding all the rows by using the entries in all the rows by using the matrix multiplication. We obtained 4th row as 600 and 6th row and 5th row also as 600, where 1050, the entry in row 1, tells us the expected demand for product 1. Second row tells us the expected demand in all the 3 regions for product 2, and so on. So this is the matrix D representing the total expected demand of the 5 products in 3 regions. So the second thing in which the company is interested in knowing is the quantities needed for each of the 4 components. Okay. Now, how we can find the number of units required for each of the 4 components? That is, how many units of component 1 are required to manufacture product 1, how many units of component 2 are required to manufacture product 2, and so on. Now we are given that there are 4 components used in the production procedure, and we need to generate 4 data items which represent the quantities needed for each component. The component requirements matrix can be found by multiplying. If CR represents our component requires matrix, then we can find this matrix by multiplying our demand matrix with the matrix R, where matrix R represents the number of components or the combination of components required for each of the product. But our matrix D, the demand matrix, was of order, our matrix D was of order 5 by 1, and the matrix R is of order 5 by 4, which means that these two matrices are not compatible for multiplication. But if we take the transpose of our matrix D, the order of that matrix will be 1 by 5, and the order of our matrix R is 5 by 4, which means that now these two matrices are compatible for multiplication, and our resultant matrix will be a row matrix of 1 row and 4 columns, where each column represents the quantities required for each component. That is, first column will tells us about the number of units required for the component 1, second column for the component 2, and so on. Now multiplying these two matrices D transpose and R, we obtain the matrix with entries 3900, 3925, 5300 and 3375, a matrix of order 1 by 4, where 3900 tells us that the units 3900 units will be required for component 1. Second column tells us that 3925 units are required for component 2, 5300 units are required for component 3, and 3375 units are required for component 4. You may also verify this matrix CR by taking the product of these two matrices on your own, and your answer should be the same. Okay. The third thing which we are is the resource requirements to produce the 4 components. So we were given with the matrix P, in which we had the data about the resources required for each component. That is, we have 4 components and 5 types of resources. That is, component 1 requires how many units for part 1, for part 2, for part 3, how many hours from the production labor, and how many hours from the assembly labor. So we are required to find the resource requirements to produce the 4 components. Okay, if capital R denotes our resource requirements matrix, then how we can obtain this matrix? Now we have 5 types of resources and 4 components, which means that this output matrix should be a matrix of order 1 by 5, that is 1 row and 5 columns, where each column represents the number of units required for resource 1, for resource 2, resource 3, hours for the production labor, and hours for the assembly labor. Okay, how we can obtain this matrix of resource requirements for the 4 components? Okay, now we have calculated our matrix CR, which is of order 1 by 4, and we had our matrix P, which was of order 4 by 5. Then by simply taking the product of these two matrices, we obtain our required matrix, resource requirement matrix RR, the required output, that is the matrix of order 1 by 5, 1 row and 5 columns. That is our component requirements matrix, that is the number of units required for each component, multiplied by our matrix P, which tells us about the number of units required from each resource for each particular component. And solving these two matrices, we obtain a matrix of order 1 by 5, and the entries are 11725, 35875, 2425, 52,000 and 46,475. So these are the number of units required from the resources, that is from part 1. These are the number of units required for part 2. These are the number of hours required for the production labor and the number of hours required for the assembly labor. The last thing which the company is interested in knowing is the total cost of producing the quantities of 5 products needed for the next month. So if T represents our matrix of total cost, then the total cost can be obtained. We had our we had a data of a matrix of cost matrix, which was of order 1 by 5. That is a matrix of order of 1 row 5 columns, where each column represents the cost for each part from the resource. And the company is interested in knowing the total cost for producing the quantities of 5 products for the next month. Okay, we have just calculated our matrix R of order 1 by 5, and we have a matrix of cost which is again of order 1 by 5. But the total cost will be a matrix of order only 1 by 1. So the required output is a matrix of order 1 by 1. How we can obtain this matrix of order 1 by 1? So the matrix T of total cost will be obtained by the product of our resource requirement matrix and the transpose of our cost matrix. So now these two matrices have order 1 by 5 and the cost matrix now have order 5 by 1. Our resource requirement matrix was 11725 and 5 entries, and the transpose of our cost matrix was 25, 15, 30, 10 and 8. So by multiplying these two matrices, we obtain some number which tells us the total cost for producing the quantities of 5 products for the next month. So just by transforming our data into the matrix form, we can easily calculate that what type of output we are interested in. For example, in part D, the output we are interested in was a matrix of order 1 by 1. So we have to adjust our set of inputs, that is the matrices of inputs. Here we have adjusted our set of inputs, that is the total cost, that is the cost matrix, by taking its transpose. By taking the transpose or adding or subtracting the matrices, we have to adjust our matrices of inputs to obtain the required output. Now we look at one more example, which is the example of input-output analysis. Now a Nobel Prize recipient, Vasily Leontief, is most noted for his input-output model for an economy. He assumed that about his model that whatever is produced will be consumed. Okay, what does his input-output analysis say is that the demand for an industry's output can come from two sources. That is the demand from different other industries or the demand from the sources other than industries. And his input-output analysis says that with the assumption that whatever is produced will be consumed. Now if we look at the demand for a particular industry, for example, if we consider the power companies which generate energy, then the power companies need the energy to operate their own plants. They need to supply the energy to the other industries, and they need the energy for other consumers like us, which means that a power company generating energy has 3 types of demands. Okay, now the first 2 types of demands are for the industry, so they come under the category of inter-industry demand. The third type of demand, that is need for other consumers, comes in the category of non-industry demand. So, which we have just said in our previous slide, that the demand for an industry's output comes in 2 forms of sources. Comes from 2 sources, that is either the demand is required by the industry or the demand is required not from the industry. In this case, the power company generating energy has inter-industry demands as the energy needed to operate its own plants and the energy needed to supply to other industries, and non-industry demand as the energy needed for the other consumers. Now what is the objective of this input-output analysis? Is to determine how much an industry should produce to satisfy both types of demands. So what will be the number of input which gives us which satisfy our required outputs. Or in other words, how much an industry should produce in order to maintain a balance between the supply and the demand. This is known as the input-output analysis. That is, if an industry is interested in knowing that what will be the number of input which will be required to balance the output. So the input-output demand can also be given in the form of input-output matrix. For example, given a matrix A of order 3 by 3 having the entries 0.3, 0.3, 0.2. The second row has 0.1, 0.2 and 0.3, and the third row having the entries 0.2, 0.1 and 0.4, where our columns, that is column 1, 2 and 3, they represent the users, and our rows, that is the row 1, 2 and 3, they represent the suppliers. So what does these entries Aij of the matrix A represent? For example, the entry A11, that is the entry in the first row and first column, represents that every dollar of output from industry 1, 30% of this value is contributed by the industry 1. Similarly, the entry A23, that is the entry in the second row and third column, this entry represents that for every dollar of output from industry 3, 30% is contributed by the industry 2. Similarly, if we want to look at this entry A32, then A32 represents that every dollar of output from industry 2, 10% is contributed by the industry 3. 10% is contributed by the industry 3. That is, the row index I is representing the number of the industry contributing, and the jth index is representing the output from that particular industry. So the entry Aij represents the amount of industry's I's output required in producing $1 of output in industry J. Now, the industry output depends upon the two types of demands, that is inter-industry demands and non-industry demand. Now, if Xj equals the output from industry J in dollars, and let Dj equals the non-industry demand in dollars for the output of industry J, then this gives us a set of simultaneous equations which, when solved, determine the level of outputs Xj at which the total supply and demand would be in equilibrium. So what do we mean by this? That industry output is equals to inter-industry demand plus non-industry demand. Okay. For example, we are provided with the data that x1 is equals to 0.3 x1, plus 0.3x2. As we have just said that this type of data gives us the simultaneous equations. Suppose we are provided with the data 0.3x1 plus 0.3x2 plus 0.2x3 is plus D1, where D1 is the non-industry demand. If x2 is equals to 0.1x1 plus 0.2x2 plus 0.3x3 plus D2, and x3 is equals to 0.2x1 plus 0.1x2 plus 0.4x3 plus D3. Now we can rearrange these terms. We have three unknowns and three equations. We can simplify them and we can rewrite them as 0.7x1 minus 0.3x2 minus 0.3x3 is equals to D1 minus 0.1x1 plus 0.8x2 minus 0.3x3 D2, and continuing simplifying, that is, and simplifying these terms, we obtained these equations. We obtained our three equations in three unknowns. So if we look carefully at this set of equations, we have our matrix A, or this set of equations. This gives us our matrix A. This 0.3, 0.3, 0.2, these coefficients are nothing but the entries of our matrix A. Now on the left hand side we have our matrix X of unknowns is equals to matrix A with the coefficients x1, x2, x3, that is A multiplied by the matrix X, plus our matrix D, that is the non-industry demand matrix. And in our second set of simultaneous equations, what we have done, we have simplified it and we have obtained that these are not the matrix brackets, but just to represent that this tells us our matrix I minus A multiplied by the matrix X is equals to our non-industry demand matrix D. Okay, how we have obtained this matrix? The second one, we start with the first one. The first matrix is clear, representing our system of equations. Now our matrix A, our equation 1 is X is equals to AX plus D, and we have to find the values of X, as usual the values of unknowns. Then by simplifying we obtained X minus AX is equals to D, and taking X common, or X can be written as identity times X, so identity times X minus AX is equals to D. Taking the matrix X common, we obtained identity minus A matrix is equals to D. And to find the unknowns X, what we have to do? We have to take the inverse of our matrix identity minus A multiplied by our non-industry demand matrix D. To find the level of outputs of x1, x2 and x3 to maintain the equilibrium between the supply and demand in our input-output analysis, we have to find the inverse of the matrix I minus A multiplied by our non-industry demand matrix D. Okay, now here in this second set of equations, we have already find our matrix I minus A is nothing but, here our matrix A is a matrix of order 3 by 3. So identity matrix will be a matrix of order 3 by 3 minus our matrix A. Okay, and our matrix, and then what else we have to find? We have to find the inverse of this difference matrix, that is the inverse of the I minus A matrix. So by taking the inverse, which you can solve easily and check that the answer written here is correct or not. We obtain the inverse of our matrix I minus A as 1.837, 0.816, 1.02, first row. Now the second row is 0.49, 1.551, 0.939, and the last row is 0.694, 0.531, and 2.163. And you can find the inverse of this matrix by any of the methods you are comfortable with, that is either by using the Gaussian transformation method or by using the method of cofactors. Okay, now we have found the inverse of the matrix I minus A. The last thing which we have to do is to multiply this matrix by our non-industry demand matrix D. For example, if D1 is given as 50, D2 is given as 30, and D3 is given as 60, then our matrix D, the non-industry demand, where 50, 30, 60 are in, let's say, in some dollars or in some particular currency, then the level of outputs for these x1, x2 and x3, which will determine us the equilibrium, will be obtained by multiplying our I minus A inverse with the matrix D, and multiplying we obtained 17.7, 12.7 and 18.04. So these are the units. So which means that industry 1 should produce this much amount of output, industry 2 should produce, these are the outputs, and the industries, industry 1 should produce this amount of output, industry 2 should produce this amount of output, and industry 3 should produce this much amount of output to maintain the equilibrium between the supply and demand. With this we end our today's lecture and this chapter as well. In our next lecture we will study about the mathematics of finance. That is what we have studied so far. We will apply these things to see the applications from the business and economics side. Hope this lecture was clear to you and you are doing well with this chapter of matrix algebra. With this, Allah Hafiz, students.